The one thing you need to take away from ESPN's NBA survey and more Giannis domination on the national scene coming up next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. My name is Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day, each and every day. And for those of you with us here on the live stream as well, you can hear me on the Bucks Radio Network throughout the season. You can find Camille on the Locked On NBA show and the Technical Foul podcast as well. Today's episode of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Let's address the elephant in the room for those in the live chat. Camille, we had the misfortune of poor timing to plan on doing a live show around 4 o'clock. Basically, the moment Micah Parsons is traded to the Green Bay Packers, so we certainly understand some diverted interest here overall among the fan base, but let's get to what we're here for, and that is the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis Antetokounmpo and Team Greece playing earlier today in EuroBasket. They beat Italy. Giannis with 30-plus points. We're going to touch on his performance coming up a little bit later. I wanted to start here, picking things up where we left off in some sorts earlier in the week and what we touched on with ESPN getting ready for the NBA season and some of the looks that they've started to take at players and teams and everything else. We mentioned there wasn't a whole lot of optimism out there for this Bucks team. Initially, they were the number one team that was chosen for who's most likely to regress. But there's one very interesting thing that I want you to leave here with and make note of. And that's part either 2 or 3 of this survey that came out, I believe, earlier today. It's not great in terms of a lot of optimism for the Bucks and all of their individual players, but there's one thing that stands out the most. And I'm going to tell you why it's important. Camille, let's start with telling you what it is. The question of who will win the Eastern Conference Finals. Who do you think had the most votes?
Eastern Conference Finals. I would probably go with it's either the Knicks or the Cavs.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with the Knicks though, just based on the Cavs kind of not getting where they wanted in the playoffs last year.
So it is the Cavs with 98 points, and we went through it on the last show that you assigned, I think, like 5, 3, or 1. So the Cavs had the most points and votes. The Knicks were second. The Orlando Magic were third. The standings question too, where the Bucks came in, I believe, 6th in most of those, somewhere around there. And I saw something else. I don't remember if it was ESPN or another service that had their Eastern Conference tiers, and the Bucks were lumped into that. It was ESPN where they gave their projections of record, and I think the Bucks were like 45 wins in the 6th seed. So that's been the general area of where the Bucks are picked to finish in the Eastern Conference. The team that finished fourth most points behind the Cavs, Knicks, and Magic to win the Eastern Conference was the Bucks. In front of a handful of teams that are picked to finish with a better record than them. And this is the important differentiation here that I think we all need to make note of. When you talk about the conference being down, that doesn't factor in until the playoffs. Because it's kind of like, you're more of the NFL person than I am, but do you have the same reaction I do when people cite the schedule? Oh, they're playing the 3rd easiest schedule in the league. Like, it's last year stuff. We don't know how difficult your schedule is until this year. Well, it's kind of similar with the NBA schedule when you can talk about the Eastern Conference stinks and they're playing in the East, so they're going to get this and they're going to get to load up on wins. 2/3 of your schedule is still the same across the league, where it's shared games. It's basically 1/3 of your games where you do get that. And it's better to be in the East, where you're going to play a handful of teams that are pretty bad, right? Not so much in the West. That doesn't really make all that much of an impact in an 82-game slate. Where it does is the playoffs. And when you get to we only really got to go through this one team versus in the West, it's go through this team, go through Luka and the Lakers, then go through Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets. Then you got to beat, the Timberwolves or the Thunder, whoever. Much different than the conversation that happens with the Eastern Conference. So I do think it's very notable and something we should keep an eye on here of not so much is there this strong belief in the Bucks, but there's at least this acknowledgement of, maybe this takes a while to come together. Maybe we think they're an average team and they're going to lose some games to better teams in the conference and in the Western Conference, and they finish 5th or 6th in the East. But when they get to the playoffs, as we've addressed many times, they have the best player in the conference. And the roadblocks that you have to go through are nowhere near what it is in the West. And that should matter a lot.
Yeah, it should matter unless you get a matchup that we learned throughout the course of the regular season that's not favorable for the Bucks. And again, we've also seen situations where you play a team in the regular season that might not break your way, but then come playoff time, you understand it, you figure out the matchups, and you get that win. So, the pathway to the championship from the East is definitely not as treacherous as it is in the West. And Giannis does raise a lot of floors alone just from the nature of him being who it is that he is. I mean, we're going to talk about how he played so far in the first game of EuroBasket here against Italy, but he's a game changer. And we've talked a lot about the weak link theory and how we do think that depth is so important. And I still stand on all of that. But we both know that if there is no Giannis running that train, it does not matter what the depth around him looks like. But I think it's a squad, like you said, to hear that they got the 4th most points to finish.
And to be clear, there was a pretty big drop off
between them. Okay.
Well, I mean, there's a drop off between the Bucks and the Magic, who are picked 3rd, but it was Cavs and Knicks overwhelming, then the Magic, then the Bucks.
Kind of in their third tier of championship contenders between. Yeah. Okay. That's fair. And I mean, we've talked about where we think the Bucks will finish this year. I could see it being anywhere 3rd to 6th in the East, and it would make sense to me. So I do like the fact that ESPN at least put a little respect on the Giannis factor of it all of hey, you get to the playoffs and things break a certain way. With the way that this Bucks team shot the ball last year, if that can continue with Giannis, you can see a pathway forward. And we've talked about it. I'm really excited to see this edition of the Milwaukee Bucks play basketball and just what they can really get out of this. But I think they're going to surprise some folks. And honestly, that's a good thing because they've been a team playing with expectations the last few seasons and have not lived up to them.
Yeah. And again, they went over this in the earlier surveys they put out this week, but I believe it's 5, 3, and 1, the points that you then give on it. Well, if I think the Bucks are going to win, I'm going to give them a 5. If it's not them, it'll be the Cavs. I'll give them 3 points. So the Bucks finished with 7 points, and it was 70 for the Knicks. So that's the gap there. Orlando, I think, was at 19 points in front of the Bucks, but 7 points tells you there's 3 people that believe in the Bucks. That it was either somebody believes strongly they're going to win the East and gave them 5, and then you had 2 others that just assigned them, their 3rd choice, or you had 2 people that said, if it's not this team, it's the Bucks, and then another person that put them 3rd. But you touched on one of the other things too, in that I do believe they're set up better start to finish than they were a year ago. And we've talked about the play style and everything else with the changes. Maybe the talent is not as good as it was a year ago. Maybe it's about the same, but I do think this is more conducive to success than the way they were built before. And, I think one of the pushbacks when we say, well, Giannis is the best player in the conference, and that's the ultimate equalizer. There's one pushback that I'm sure a lot of people will have. No one in this room and most nobody in the chat either. But on the national stage and any non-Bucks believers, there's one thing there. So I want to address that. And then, as we mentioned, Giannis with a pretty strong stat line in game 1 of EuroBasket against Italy earlier today. We'll get into that conversation coming up next on Locked On Bucks. Time to talk to you about our friends over at Monarch Money. Most people cannot name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have that full picture, you can end up leaving a lot of money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings you your entire financial life together. in one clean, easy to use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch's built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is here for you. They do the heavy lifting for you, where you can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Maybe you're combining this money and trying to track this with a partner. Monarch Money makes it easier than ever to track those shared accounts and even set goals for future purchases or just overall financial health, maximizing your investments, increasing your savings rate, and easily reviewing finances with your partner and even a financial advisor. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. It's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONNBA. So we pointed out you got the best player in the conference, and that should count for something. But for all the people that say, well, didn't you have that last year? Didn't you have that 2 years ago? Didn't you have that 3 years ago? And yes, there was injuries there, and one of those was to Giannis. 2 years technically to Giannis. But to me, here's the biggest difference. We touched on it. A modernized approach to the game. The way the Bucks were set up before, I think with the benefit of hindsight and removing ourselves from that, you could see the flaws with that team and how it was built. And it's not to say there's no flaws with this current iteration of the group, but the play style was very archaic. And it's, I'm not a car guy, Camille, but it's kind of like if you have, I don't even want to name anything, whatever the best car in the world is, right? And you have that, and like, well, why aren't you winning races? And then you take a look under the hood and you see, oh, you haven't serviced this thing, or like, this is pretty old. This is 20 years old. There's some flaws that you start to pick at and see. I'm like, well, maybe on the right day you can beat this guy off the line, but it's not going to happen consistently. That is where it feels like the Bucks have been for the last 3 years of, yeah, you got Giannis, and if you get the right matchup, you can win a couple of series here. But ultimately, there's a fatal flaw or flaws that feel like it's going to catch up with you. And I think that's what we've seen the last 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you've seen Bucks fans saying is that they think other fan bases and media personalities are underestimating just how much better this team will be, being faster, being younger in that sense. And when you think about the why, that's what's being pointed to your point about just how the team was constructed and some of the weaknesses of it, therein it lied. Like, you think of just the last 2 years with Dame, which to think about, like, that's our Locked In Bucks season. Justin, has been the Dame era so far of the team. But the first year, like, the trade happened, you're kind of like, well, this feels like a roster that's still better utilized if you had a more defensive minded point guard at your head spot rather than having Dame there. But the trade happened so late. You make do with what you have. Like, we knew Malik Beasley checking other teams' opposing best players probably wasn't going to be a pathway to success.
Wait. Don't just gloss over that. We can go back to media day that year when we heard what was the plan for Malik Beasley. And I remember being in the room with Eric Name and both kind of looking at each other like, what?
Is what we doing? And that's what they were doing. And it did not work. And then last season, we were like, this roster makes more sense. You have more defense on this roster. It makes more sense. And you saw that in spurts, like definitely better than what you had the year before, but still having to find what the right lineups were, the right rotations were, and leaning a bit more on some of those younger legs rather than some of those veteran legs you depended on for so long. Like Pat Connaughton in year one with Doc, got the playing time, and he played the role of a great vet. Year two under Doc here, but we saw the rotation, like he had to be pushed down in the rotation there to allow other guys to come up. Chris Middleton, we saw what he gave in that playoff series against the Pacers 2 years ago. But of course, during that time, we also learned that he had to have double ankle surgery. And then when he came back, it's just not the same Chris Middleton. And prior to the surgeries, he was already losing some of that lateral quickness. So it just kind of was a thing of like, okay, the pieces make sense if they were fully healthy, fully optimized, but we're no longer dealing with that type of roster at the moment. So now we have to pivot. And you're in a spot now with the roster where you're looking for older legs. You're pointing at Giannis and you're pointing at Bobby for the most part of like, yeah, you guys are the OGs on this team. And you have a lot of younger legs. You know what I mean? Like to run around them. So like
3 guys that are 30 or older on this roster now.
That's it. That's a big change for this Bucks team. And I think you'll see it in the play style reflect just kind of like a more modern style of playing basketball a little bit with the pace picking up.
Yeah, I think we talked about it on this show too. I definitely talked about it with a few other people and some people I remember talking about it with the team too, in that the first year that you lost to the Pacers 2 years ago, where you look back on it and you think about like knee-jerk reactions and moves to make. It was obviously disappointing to not get out of the first round 2 years in a row, where you're like, well, we didn't have Giannis, so the expectations were kind of here, but let's not make any knee-jerk reactions here, because I think there's a case to be made. We drew the absolute worst possible opponent here for how we're set up. And, if things go differently and the Pacers are the 5 seed, maybe it's a Bucks team that's reaching the conference finals that year. I don't think they had the horses to beat Boston, but you're out of the first round. But it was probably necessary to have that for a second year to just remind you, look, I get that. And there is some validity to that the Indiana Pacers, I think, are without question, or were in those 2 seasons, the worst possible playoff matchup for the Bucks. But the Indiana Pacers are not alone. There are more teams that are starting to play that style. So if you're going to go down the path and say, well, we just can't play Indiana, we have to hope we avoid that matchup, there's starting to be more and more teams that are there, that you're all of a sudden, instead of saying we can't play this team, we have to play this team. And you're starting to search for a list that's fewer and fewer of teams that it lines up against. So while it was a tough pill to swallow and certainly beyond disappointing to lose in the first round, 2 consecutive years of the Pacers and 3 years overall, I do think it helped deliver the message that, everybody had been preaching for years of like, get more athletic, get younger, all of these other things that led the Bucks down this path to say, we still have the best player in the conference. We need to lean into that and supplement him with players that can play a different style of play faster, give us some more athleticism, guys that can just hold up defensively. Like I think it was one of the things that came up in the conversation with Sparky. I think he was a little lower on the defense than you and I are, but I'm not saying they have first team all defensive guys. I don't know if Giannis even gets there, but they don't have guys any longer that you look at and you say, well, we can attack this guy, put that guy in a pick and roll, and that's going to be 2 points every time down the floor. They've eliminated that, and that's going to make a lot of progress.
It is, and it makes me wonder too, can this group come together this year? Frank mentioned it a lot last season. Can this team come together and be greater than the sum of its parts? Like, can you actually put something on the court? And Frank talked a lot about the offense of like, when you look at each individual part, like you would think the sum would be a little bit greater than what we're getting. And I wonder if this year, where it comes for the defense, if it's one of those things where you're looking at the guys on the court and you're like, well, I don't really see all defense. I don't really see him that way. But as a unit, just connected on a string, understanding where to be, understanding the rotations, understanding the way they need to play, being a bit stronger at point of attack where you're not causing all of these other rotations to happen behind you because you're consistently getting beat. Like if they can also find that level of synergy too from the coaching staff, from them on the court together, like just be a connected defense. And that can get you a lot from being just connected and understanding where you need to be, where you should be, what your rotations are, if you should help from here, if you should not help from here, who's supposed to be helping. Like that understanding, I think, can help this defense. Like that was already middle of the pack last season, could be a top 10 unit. And I think that if championship is something that they're trying to do and shoot over expectations for this season, like that defense is going to have to be really, really solid.
To wrap it up, I mean, that was the big takeaway. For as much as Bucks fans have pulled the knives out for ESPN, in many cases, rightfully so, and just the national media voice overall, the kind of acknowledgement that came from this group of, look, the best player in the conference, having him on your team, it matters most in the playoffs than it does the regular season. And we can acknowledge maybe this team is middle of the pack in the Eastern Conference in the regular season, but if they're healthy and it works around this guy, we're not going to sleep on this team to be a dark horse to win the Eastern Conference. And that's what those survey results, again, small sample of those that participated, but still, that's what those results showed us here from ESPN. So head over if you want to check it out yourself as well. It was their results, the NBA predictions that were posted earlier in the day on Thursday, the 25-26 East and Western Conference predictions, where you see, and it brought on a double triple take for me, basically. I'm like, wow, okay. So they're slotting the Bucks up there in terms of potential playoff success. We mentioned Giannis returning to the national scene in meaningful games earlier today as well. We'll take a look at his performance in the EuroBasket opener for Team Greece coming up next. Well, it's a message to our listeners here. We need your help. An important request to all of our Locked On Bucks faithful here. Locked On wants to hear from you. We put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and to make your favorite podcasts even better. It's your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't like, and answer some questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcasts.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that is lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. You can also find the link in our show notes. Thanks a lot for helping us out. So Team Greece played earlier today in EuroBasket, Camille. They were victorious, taking down Team Italy. Giannis finished with 31 points, 14 of 20 from the floor. So again, very efficient. We saw a couple more instances of that Dirk-esque one-legged fadeaway step back jumper. So you love to see that. You and I were talking a little bit before the game, and it was probably scramble mode for a lot of Bucks fans. I'm not going to call you out, Camille. I don't know what method you used to watch the game. Maybe the same as some other fans, but you get to the point of, wait, how do I watch this again? And reacquainting yourself with courtside 1981 if you went that route, or maybe look for something else out there. But watching it, Giannis, no surprise, was clearly the best player on the floor at all times in it. And we saw John Horst and Doc Rivers and Darvin Ham in the stands there out there watching Giannis. It did feel like I've watched Giannis for over 10 years here. Kind of feels like this is 3/4 speed Giannis, that maybe there's a message of, I'm gonna let you play, take it easy, because now more than ever, it is extremely important we have you on the floor this season.
Man, there was the one play where he slipped on the wet spot. And he kind of did the splits in the middle of the game. Yeah. I text you when I saw it, like my whole life flashed before my eyes when I saw that man slip on the court and go down like that. But look, dominant game from Giannis. It's always a pleasure to watch him play basketball, even if I get terrified when I see him take a tumble along the way. But he had 23 points in 23 minutes initially. That stood out. I was just like, he's having his way. And it was on a Greece team where he's playing a role that he does not play in the NBA. Like in the NBA for the Bucks, he's point forward. The ball is in his hand. He's going to have such a high usage rate. And that is not how Greece utilizes him. And he still found a way to give you 31 and 7 along the way, being more of a traditional big on the court. But real cool seeing him on the court. Love seeing him share the court with his brothers at times too. The Nassas being back out there, seeing how he looks coming off of his own Achilles injury, seeing Costas out there, where I was like, I knew he had gotten bigger, but like he is huge now. Costas is like a true big now, and seeing him and Giannis be like a dual front court together out there, like the story of just them playing for Greece after all that their family went through along the way, that I always find some joy in, of seeing them suit up, but took a lot of joy in seeing Giannis just do his thing and look like Giannis in a whole different type of role than what we're going to see him play for the Bucks.
We had, I think we had Antetokounmpo on the floor at all times too, basically with the three of them on the team. And the first substitution of the game for Greece was Giannis exiting, and both Giannis and Costas entering the game. So keeping an eye too, like Giannis dominant, no surprise there. But tracking Thanasis, as you know, we've talked about on this show too, that he has hinted at an NBA return, and even went as far as, I don't remember if he explicitly said it, but hinted at, I don't want to live in Giannis's shadow. I want to prove that I'm making the NBA on my own accord as well. So we'll see where it goes from there with Thanasis, who's 11 months, maybe 10 removed from that Achilles surgery and recovery, and now back on the floor and international play. And then Kostas as well, if this could potentially open something up for him on a two-way deal and start to carve out a space, some space for him on an NBA roster. Next up for Greece is Cyprus on Saturday, and that is a 10 a.m. game Saturday morning for Greece and Cyprus. They have Georgia then on Sunday. The big ones don't come in terms of like star-studded matchups. The big ones don't come until after Labor Day. There's a Greece versus Spain game towards the end of next week, and I think that's their group that then you would have to see once we get to the round of 16 if we can see a Giannis versus Luka matchup, or a Giannis versus Jokic, and any of that as well. One last thing to point out here, Camille, is we briefly touched on this on our show a couple of days ago when there was the report of Malik Beasley being cleared initially. There has been some additional context added to it where he is not cleared. I don't remember the exact wording, but there is a very distinct difference with the SEC and the FBI of subject versus target.
Yes.
He is not the worst case scenario, but he's not in the clear yet. And we did start to hear in the last couple of days, the Knicks, the Cavaliers, the Pistons, and I believe the Timberwolves were the four teams that were really keeping tabs on this. So if it does start to clear up here for Malik Beasley and he's available, those first two teams are certainly interesting to say, hey, you know what? You're clear. We get the benefit of, we get the guy that was one of the best shooters in the league last year and the last handful of years for the veteran minimum.
Yeah, and that's a very dangerous spot for Malik Beasley to be in because he does provide value. Like earlier in the show, we made, I made the comments about this defense. You did as well, of like, but that's not what he's here to do. Like, this is a man who by himself made like 319 threes last season. Like the two guys who the Pistons brought in to kind of replace him with Lillard and Duncan Robinson, like together, they combined to shoot like 306 threes. So like the two of them together didn't even make as many threes as Malik Beasley did by himself. A professional skill set that Bees does have as that shooter, that unconscious 3-point shooter. So like a team that gets him on the minimum, if all of this stuff is officially cleared up, not cleared up in the way that Sham said, but like cleared up with the feds, then like a team's going to get a really good player on a contract that makes it like a steal.
You do wonder, and we're getting way in front of ourselves and putting the cart in front of the horse, if that does happen. And I understand there's extenuating circumstances this time, but if you're taking the veteran minimum 2 out of 3 years, if you're Malik Beasley, and even last year you doubled your pay, I wonder what the ceiling is for your future earnings go forward. If we've talked about it in the past too, like once you hit that level, again, we're not complaining because it was a major benefit to the Bucks, but Gary Trent Jr. took the same amount once again. Once you drop down to that level, it's tough to move into the full mid-level and beyond from that point forward. So it may be another value option in years to come for a player like Malik Beasley.
Which is crazy because he was in line to sign like a 3-year 40.
It was the full mid-level, 342. Yeah.
And then this happened, and it's like now you're back to someone who's going to be a minimum signing if you do play in the league this year.
We didn't address any of the comments in the chat, so bad job by us. But a lot of people who are, believing in this Bucks team and saying, hey, it's about time. We see some of the national outlets show a spark of belief in this group and calls that the Bucks are being underestimated and slept on. There's one other question that popped up. We'll tackle just as we wrap up here. Do we think the Bucks will not the Bucks, but do we think Russell Westbrook will find a team? At one point, there were people hinting at the Bucks. We both, it's a tough fit with Giannis. It sounds like if it happens, it's going to be Sacramento, and the Kings are still feverishly working to open up a roster spot for him. There was rumors of shopping Malik Monk to do that, which, that's an interesting approach. And they have wisely, in recent days, apparently said, well, let's not be that dramatic. So I would assume he ends up with the Kings and something happens where Sacramento clears up a roster spot between now and 4 weeks from now when training camp starts.
Yeah, that's where I'm thinking too. Everything I've seen, as you mentioned, has been the same thing with the Kings being a team that has the most interest in Westbrook. Like first I saw his hand was kind of messed up, like something had happened with his hand. He was dealing with that injury and the recovery from that. But most recently saw him shooting basketball on a yacht, which was super player. I've never seen something like that before. He's just in the middle of the sea or the ocean or something, just shooting basketballs on a hoop on a yacht. So Russ is staying in shape. He's staying ready for this moment. But I do think that if he is signed, it's going to be, I could honestly see Russ not being on a roster when the season actually kicks off, and him being somebody who is signed throughout the season as injuries strike. If the Kings don't make something happen for him before training camp, I think he's going to end up being one of those guys who signed just during the season.
I don't know if I got by AI and the internet. I saw the video of Kyle Kuzma playing
in the Philippines. I don't know if that's old or new.
I saw that and thought, I don't know if this is new or not, but regardless, we're moving on here. If you know, you know. What a whirlwind afternoon this has been. Behind the scenes, this was, I mean, we were about 15 minutes late to the live recording. Nothing was working on my end on the computer or anything else. It's still been a bit of a train wreck behind the scenes. We get the Micah Parsons news falling into our lap. So your second listen here, I believe he's live right now. Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers is digging into the acquisition of Micah Parsons. So give that a listen and a view for your second stop of the day. We are once again going to take the Friday off here. We are all taking, I hope, Monday off for Labor Day. I know Camille and I are. I hope the rest of you are able to as well. And then back in the full swing starting Tuesday next week, because we will be in September. And with that, we will be Monday, 4 weeks away from Media Day and training camp officially opening.
Crazy. But that makes sense because football is starting up next week too. So like once the NFL season kicks off, I'm always like, well, we're like 2-3 weeks away from like NBA stuff starting to really kick off too. So a fun time. That's one positive when the weather starts to betray us here in Wisconsin with the cold coming along. Like the sports are back, and I'm always happy with that. And
also shouts to everybody that we've bumped into along the way here out in public. I had two more earlier today. You just had the experience as well. So the Locked On Bucks fam is out there everywhere.
They are. I was at the movies, and I was just walking through the lobby, and I heard just Locked On Bucks, and I was just like, I love it. So yeah, shout out to all the everydayers, especially when you guys see us out. Like the love is always really fun. So if you see us, make sure y'all say hi.
That'll do it for today's show. Again, long weekend here. Hope everybody's able to enjoy an extended weekend and has a happy and safe Labor Day. And then we get into it. All of the projections, the over-unders, the player comps, all of it is going to start to come your way next week when we're in September and fastly approaching Media Day. That'll do it for today. For Camille, I'm Justin. We will talk with you guys once again next week on Locked On Bucks.